Let's bring in our house epidemiologist. He is also from the University of Ottawa, Raywat Deonandan. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
How important is contact tracing?
It's everything. So imagine that we do reopen, as we will, and it'll be great. And we're walking around the community, taking our precautions, doing our social distancing and wearing our masks. And as part of our public health surveillance system, there are some random screenings happening. And we find out that someone, let's say on the table next to you in the cafe, tested positive. Well, we need to find out now who that person may have infected and find out who that next person may have infected in order to quarantine them and prevent everybody else from being quarantined. That process is called contact tracing. So it is essential. It's one of the three pillars to the public health infrastructure that allows us to get out of this. And those three pillars are T for testing, T for tracing, and I for isolation. Everyone talks a lot about the tests. That's important. But the tracing is just as important. And it's so far it's low tech. But as we've talked about before, there's a lot of new technologies coming down the pipeline to help us.
So to this point, in prior epidemics or prior pandemics, we didn't necessarily have cell phones. So this was all done by hand, essentially?
That's exactly right. Detectives essentially track you down, interrogate you. Well, that's a rough word to use, but investigate your comings and goings to find out who you might have been in contact with, and then try to find those people and test them as well. So in Iceland, in fact, they hire actual criminal detectives to do contact tracing to make sure they get it right. But we're in a new era, and we shouldn't have to rely on these medieval techniques anymore. We're in the 21st century. Let's use 21st century tools.
I know some people talked about maybe keeping a little diary or a log of where you'd been and the days, and that's essentially what these apps can do. Do you understand people's concerns about privacy? Can all of that be mitigated?
Oh, it's a huge concern, and this is what we have to balance here, is the natural desire to preserve your civil liberties against the natural desire to stay safe against the disease. So one of the challenges here is the kind of tracking that an app might do. There's the GPS approach or the Bluetooth approach. And the GPS approach, a big brother kind of figure, monitors where you go all the time, and that's stored in a central server. And so if someone tests positive, we know right away where you've been. That's probably the most efficient way, but it's also the scariest way. The Bluetooth way, on the other hand, allows the data to be stored on your personal device. So every time you walk by a person, the phones talk to each other and they know where they've been, but nobody else knows. It's only when you get tested positive that public health will ask you, do you mind releasing the data from your phone just in the last 2 weeks so we know who you might have come in contact with? So that's the best way to mitigate it so far. And that's the approach that Google and Apple apparently are taking as they combined in an unprecedented fashion to put their combined military-level corporate might to solving this problem. And I anticipate they're going to have an interesting solution.
And I anticipate, hopefully, an announcement from them soon. Meantime, all eyes on this Alberta app at this point?
Yeah, I'm glad they're doing their thing, and other jurisdictions have their thing as well. Every European country has their own app. Australia has a pretty good app. Eventually, though, the apps are going to have to play nice together. So this heterogeneous approach to app formulation is a little worrying to me. I prefer one standard approach so that we can combine the data easily in case someone travels between provinces, for example. But someone has to take the lead, and I'm glad one province is stepping up and doing so.
So Google and Apple, that app should solve this if it comes out quickly enough and we get all the cooperation needed.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, they've got the tools and the expertise and the money, the resources to make it happen fast and efficiently, and also to push the product to everyone's phones in a quick manner. So I would rather rely on the big boys to solve this problem fast, but if they don't get there fast, we have to solve it for them.
It'll be interesting, especially hearing about some countries, the uptake on downloading these apps hasn't been great. So it'd be an interesting question to talk about another day if these apps will just simply be pushed to our phone and we won't have a choice or not. But again, we'll talk in the future. Raywat Deonandan, always appreciate your time and insight on things like this.
Thank you very much.
And just